Hey everybody, welcome into the back room. I'm Andy Ostroy. We have Michael Steele back with us today. It's always a fun chat with Michael. We will get to him in just a second, but first, thanks for tuning in. We appreciate you listening, and we'd love to hear your comments. So email us at backroomandy@gmail.com and or post on our social media, and we'll read some feedback next time. And if you like the podcast, please rate and review and follow or subscribe, and you'll be notified every time we post a new episode. So Michael Steele is the co-host of MS Now's The Weeknight and host of the Michael Steele Podcast. Prior to joining MS Now as a political analyst, he was elected Lieutenant Governor of Maryland in 2003. Following his time as Lieutenant Governor, he served as chairman of the Republican National Committee from 2009 to 2011. Michael was the first African-American to hold either office. He has appeared on Meet the Press, Face the Nation, Real Time with Bill Maher, and The Daily Show, and is also the author of two books, Right Now, a 12-step program for defeating the Obama agenda, and The Recovering Politician's 12-step program to survive crisis. Michael, welcome back into the back room.
It's so good to be back in the back room, baby. How's it going back here? We're a little quiet. I don't know where the crickets, man. Come on now.
This is where everything happens, right here in the back room. So much has happened in the last 2 weeks. I mean, it feels like 6 months, but there's been an election, a shutdown, all this Epstein stuff, court rulings. It's insane what's Marjorie Taylor Greene. So let's start with the election. Give me your major takeaways from what we saw a couple weeks ago.
Yeah, I think the top line elections for me, I mean, and look, I kind of look at it a little bit differently, I think, than some, because this is very reminiscent of 2009 when I was RNC chairman. And I had the task of winning New Jersey and Virginia in front of me, which were the two big races in the country at that time, on the heels of the election of Barack Obama. And what that would mean at that point, the president had already launched a number of environmental initiatives. I started talking about healthcare, and started laying up some policy narratives that, were test cases, if you will, for messaging and operationalizing your campaign ground game to see if you can turn out voters around these issues. And so in that respect, there were some similarities, but not many. But the fundamental difference was, in this case, the economy, affordability, those things that sort of struck people at their kitchen table. In fact, in many respects, an extension of the 24 election. So it allowed Democrats the opportunity to message the affordability issue, from, Mondami to, Mikey Sherrill. You had, this ability to sort of sit with people at their kitchen tables. And I think the Democrats did a very effective job of that. And they translated that, Andy, to their grassroots operation, their turnout. And we saw the results of that, because they recognized that among the electorate, there was beginning a shift. Those voters who aligned themselves with in 24 to Trump, particularly younger voters, male voters, Hispanic voters, peeled back their support, because it's one thing to have Donald Trump tell you, we're going to lock up all the criminals and deport them. And it's another thing to see ICE, jackbooted thug ICE agents come take your abuela away from you on her way from the grocery store. Mm-hmm. Resonates very different.
Yeah.
And I think that that's something that, as a top line, along with the affordability narrative, moved the American voter in a way that gave Democrats an astounding set of victories up and down the line. Even when you look at Prop 50 in California, where there was no human being on the ballot, as people were saying, that had a resonance with voters. This idea that, okay, you want to rig the election, we're gonna match you. We're gonna find a way to defeat that effort.
Yeah.
So I think that's an important setup for going forward.
And speaking of Prop 50, there's been a really ironic turn of events with this whole gerrymandering thing, with this court ruling over the Texas redistricting. And it could end up being the biggest backfire ever, where Texas doesn't do shit and California still gets to do it. I mean, think about that outcome. Who would have predicted that?
That is. Look, when you as they say, FAFO, baby. And there's a whole lot of finding out going on right now for Republicans. Look, when you follow a guy who has no political interest in your survivability, but only has that interest in his own, you run into these types of outcomes. The court ruling in California is interesting because it should be noted the Supreme Court has historically not weighed in on these types of decisions because they see them first and foremost as within the purview of the states, and secondly, political. And so it's going to be, the Roberts Court is going to be hard pressed to overturn that ruling by the federal court, lower court. And so you're absolutely right. You can have a situation where Texas can't do it, California will do it,
and they're not undoing it.
They're not undoing it. But here's the other thing to keep in mind, which again, this is something my party has lost sight of, in its zeal for power, its lust for grift. That at the end of the day, voters are going to vote, and you have no damn clue how they're going to vote. I can guarantee you that the polling that the party was fed going into the elections that were held earlier this month shed two pieces of light on them. One, that the races were going to be close, and two, that the voters were moving away from them. But in their zeal to perpetuate the grift, meaning we're still going to feed the line of bullshit to people to get them to write the checks, to still pony up their cash. It's not about turning out anymore. It's about grabbing the cash. That put them in a position of weakness relative to what was going to happen at the ballot box. When you scale that out, Andy, and you look at Texas, yes, you created 5 new red districts. And for folks who are listening to this, I just did air quotes around the red districts, thinking that these are going to be absolute winners for the GOP, that you're going to absolutely pick up these 5 seats. No, you're not. You're not guaranteed that, because now you have evidence that shows you that the base vote that was with you in 24 was not with you in 25, and likely, given the trend lines, won't be with you in 26.
Yeah. Plus the liberals that you pushed out of these districts, they're going into other districts, and who knows how they're going to vote and sway the outcome of that district.
Exactly. You move the pieces on the chessboard, and if you've ever played chess, when you move a piece, it does have an effect on the other pieces. It does impact which way they go next, and so that's the lesson of politics, which is why, going back to when I was a county chairman, in a very difficult, Democratic county, trying to get 58,000 Republicans energized in a county of 800,000 people, and more importantly, trying to get those other 700,000 Democrats interested in what we were doing. I had to make a case. If I had an issue with the policies of the administration at that time, and that's in the state, the governor was Glendening, then I had to make the case. And the party has stopped making the case to the American people. Where is our health care plan, since we don't like Obamacare? Where is our environmental plan, since we think there's no such thing as global warming?
Well, Michael, to be fair, it's only been 15 years.
Dan, you're right. I forgot about that. You are absolutely right.
Got to give them a little time to come up with this time. The Fox News poll that came out this week, they asked voters, if the midterms were held today, who would you choose? And Democrats were ahead by 14 points. That's astounding.
So we had a little joke we talked about this on my show, the Weeknight, last night with Cornell Belcher, and we had Simone and I were joking in the break, and she was talking about how polls are a snapshot, right? And we just kind of laugh about this concept, but the most important thing about that poll was not so much the numbers around Trump's popularity. I mean, it's 37, 38. Yeah, we don't like him. But it was the generic ballot. Mm-hmm. And I can tell you, as, a strategist, chairman, operative, all that stuff, that number is a scary ass number, because that means that voters prefer someone they don't know.
They'll take
someone
anyone
they've not heard of.
They'll take Clint Eastwood's chair
over anyone you're putting up.
Mm-hmm.
And that's a big problem. When that generic number gets into double digits, you're looking at potential wipeout scenarios. Now, everybody put their pants back on, take the party hat off, settle down, because we are a year out mm-hmm. from anything like that happening. What that polling is meant to do now is to give you a sense, coming on the heels of the recent election and several of the actions this president has taken during that time and before, what voters are thinking and feeling. So yes, in one sense, it is a snapshot in time, but it is actually a little bit more than that. It is a marker of what kind of messaging is working, what kind of efforts by the incumbent are failing, and where, when you look at the Congress, a Congress that has proven itself to be wholly irrelevant to anything this administration is doing, because they don't give a crap, they don't care. Donald Trump could literally walk out and say, we just blew up some boats, and they were drunk.
I feel bad for the nuns that were on them.
Right, exactly. So, that's where we are. They don't care, mm-hmm. But the voters do, and the voters are paying much more attention now because of the pressures we talked about a moment ago: affordability issues, economic pressures, job pressures. We have discounted as a country the impact the firing of well over, 500,000 federal employees is having on the economy, is having on their personal economies, is having on, somebody who knows someone. That's still relevant. You may think, well, it's 2-3 levels removed from me, but it create an impression on how you're perceiving more broadly what's happening to your fellow citizens. So all these things factor in right now, and that generic number is a reflection of those things, and gives you an early warning sign of what potentially could come. Now, again, I go back and say, we could be in June of next year, of 26, and the generic ballot is a single-digit number. Democrats may be +6 or +8. But if they're still +10, +12, certainly +14, +16, that's not a good day for Republicans in politics.
Yeah. Well, in analyzing this, the question that really needs to be asked is, what would change? So you have Donald Trump is the head of the party. He's president. Mm-hmm. And then you have the party itself. We know that Donald Trump, I personally believe he's a sociopath, which explains a lot of what he says and does. He's right. Never going to be the guy that goes, you know what, my economy does suck, and here's how I'm going to change it, right? He's going to tell you, who are you going to believe, me or your lying grocery bills, right? That's what he's doing right now. As much as we saw Joe Biden lose an election because he tried to convince people the economy was not great, but it was pretty great, but there's room for making it better. They're doing the same thing. J.D. Vance this week, literally, if you close your eyes and someone said it was Joe Biden, he said the exact same things that Joe Biden said. So they're not learning. So the question is, where would the pivot be? Who would make the pivot that would then result in the electorate, Republicans and independents, going, oh, okay, now I see some light at the end of this tunnel? Trump's never going to admit to anything being bad. Everything's always going to be great, the best. He's going to tell people they're stupid. Farmers, you're stupid. Farmers, you're stupid because you don't understand how great the tariffs have been. Like, that's who he is. So how does it change to the point where the polling starts to change?
And that's the problem Republicans have. It doesn't. Okay. It's a little bit like the Epstein files. Everybody, Donald Trump said, and the MAGA-verse bought into the idea of releasing the files. Mm-hmm. And Donald Trump was like, reelect me and I'll release the files. Give me the power, I'll give you the files. Give me the power, I'll give you the files. Okay, here's the power. Where are the files? Mm-hmm. And then Donald Trump was like, well, no, I don't think we really need to release the files. There's nothing there. This is just a hoax. I don't understand what everybody's all excited about. Y'all need to stop talking about this shit and move on.
But I can give you the Amelia Earhart files.
Right.
I'll give you the MLK files. I'll even throw in the JFK files.
I'll throw in JFK. I'll give you everything else but that. Mm-hmm. And the base is like, nah, bitch, we want what you said you were going to give us. This is not complicated for us. But here's the piece to your question. What did Republicans do? Republicans said, there's nothing there. And I think that we need to, the president is right. And once they say that, there's no more conversation, right? And Johnson and even Thune was like, no, we don't need to get into this. Then, for some magical reason, Donald Trump said, release the files, right? And then you got Mike Johnson, who's sitting there protesting, it's like, oh, I think this is awful. But what does he do? He has to go along with the vote. My point is that there is no movement in this messaging about affordability, about people's personal economies, about the realities of what they're going through, unless and until Donald Trump has a revelatory moment in which he sees a political advantage to him or a financial one. And as long as that is not perceived or understood by him, he is going to continue to persist in this idea that his administration is in the right and everybody needs to get on his page. Mm-hmm. That's why you saw this sort of Marie Antoinette kind of banquet last week or earlier this week with MSB, with Mohammed bin Salman from Saudi Arabia, lavishing up not just praise, but really leveling up the Gilded Age in the face of everyone saying, I'm hurting. And how voters take that in and put that away in their brains doesn't matter to Donald Trump, but it matters to Speaker Thune because now the Senate may be in play for those Republicans who otherwise thought that they wouldn't have to worry about these issues going into next year. The House has always been in play, but now made much more difficult. Mm-hmm. So the political ramifications are a calculation that any normal president would assess, lean into, and pivot in their messaging. You're right, neither Biden nor Trump or their minions around them understood that moment. Mm-hmm. And Biden paid a price. Donald Trump has already begun to pay a price in this past election and is setting himself for a bigger price to pay next year.
Yeah, and it's a real dilemma for the party because, to me, they're at an inflection point right now where they have to do again what they just did with the Epstein files and go against him, create a rift that we've not seen before, or they have to continue following him off the cliff. And if they follow him off the cliff, because he's going to continue to drive off the cliff. I mean, when people are struggling and not getting SNAP benefits and talking about affordability, would you hold that kind of lavish dinner at the White House after you've already knocked down the East Wing and said you're building a $300 million ballroom? But on top of that, with the Prince of Saudi Arabia, which a country which many people believe was in large part responsible for 9/11, the butchering, dismembering of Jamal Khashoggi. I mean, you're pissing off everyone who's struggling with the economy, and you're pissing off your base who don't want to see you sitting there blowing MBS at a dinner or in the White House, right?
There you go.
So it's like, is there no one around him? Because he's never going to change. So if no one around him has the balls to say, sir, this is not a good look for you, for us, for the party, let's think of something else. When does it change? It doesn't change. So
it doesn't change.
The party's at a fork in the road. What do they do from this point forward?
No. The party's not at a fork in the road.
You don't think?
The party is past the fork, baby.
Right.
Oh, no, we're past the fork.
Yeah, no, I agree with that. Right.
we gone down the road. No, we're past the fork. This is not a fork moment. No, the party. I think, and I get the centerpiece of your question, but I think we're at the point where we need to stop asking when will the party change, because it won't. This party does not have it within its core.
Well, that's my point.
Yeah. It doesn't have it within its core to change. It has already made the change. It has changed from the party of Lincoln, Reagan, Eisenhower, Bush to the party of Trump. Call it MAGA, call it whatever you want. It has taken on the persona of the Mad King, and it is bought into its baser instincts. The party has always wrestled with its cultural self and its darker self. And when those two things align the way they have, you have a party that doesn't blink an eye when its messengers and its leaders cohort with a racist like Mr. Nick Fuentes, is Nick? Yeah. Mm-hmm. Fuentes, right? Or when it lavishes praise and Gilded Age accoutrements on someone we know. Donald Trump's own intelligence community told him MBS was responsible for the death and dismemberment of Mr. Khashoggi. Mm-hmm. His own. This wasn't Joe Biden's CIA. This wasn't George Bush's CIA. It wasn't Barack Obama's CIA. It was Donald Trump's own intelligence telling him what happened to that man when he walked into that console. And Donald Trump ignored it because Donald Trump interests lie not in the justice for Khashoggi, but for what he can get out of MBS for his sons and the empire that he's trying to rebuild. Mm-hmm. He's got hotels and golf courses, live golf course. That whole bullshit is all MBS money. Mm-hmm. And you think Donald Trump is going to F with that? Hell no. So the party is not, and the party is in no position to stop that. They are as much the beneficiaries of the grift as Trump is, and they're not giving up the cash.
Yeah.
Everybody's cutting their deals, and in the meantime, principle, policy be damned. And so we're past the point where there's any recovery here. What we're going to see play out is tripwires that causes fissures within that universe, and how those who are waiting in the wings, like J.D. Vance, maybe Marco Rubio, but he's already conceded, the ground to J.D. Vance, hoping, I guess, to be on his ticket in 28 as his VP. But all these folks have ceded ground right now, and we just wait for the fight within. It's coming. It's going to come. But we just don't know in what form and how long it will take.
Well, this leads into my next question, which is really about the fact that even the day he started in January, Donald Trump was a lame duck president for all intents and purposes. Right. But it's hard not to look at the last several weeks and not see that he is a seriously wounded animal. He has lost at the ballot box. He has lost in Congress. He's lost in the court of law. He's losing in the court of public opinion. He's lost with independents. He's lost with MAGA and people like Marjorie Taylor Greene. There are things happening we have not seen before, and he can't seem to win anything. And on top of that, the resistance movement, which sort of really amped up a few weeks ago with the No Kings protest,
Right.
That's like a bookend to what's happening now. The Epstein situation, which I think is an existential threat to him. Do you think there's some kind of inflection point that we have finally reached where he is so wounded and the MAGA fever might be finally starting to break a little bit?
I don't know if I'm there yet, Andy. I don't, because no one, I mean, Marjorie Taylor Greene notwithstanding, and yes, Donald Trump may call her names, but there hasn't been a break. I mean, look, what is Marjorie Taylor Greene pushing? She's pushing the Epstein narrative. But she's not pushing on any other policy narratives.
Well, she's gone against him on the economy, on the shutdown, on inflation, on the Iran bombing, on Israel and Gaza. She's pushed back a lot these last few months.
Well, okay, all right. So, but I guess my point is, is there a movement behind her that she's kind of leading in that direction? Mm-hmm. Are there other voices hearing hers who stand next to her and say she's right, I'm with her? I haven't seen that. Mm-hmm. I get the lone voice. There's always been the lone voice at some point that sort of popped up and said, Trump crazy as hell, stay away, right? Warning, Will Robinson, warning, right? You always had that. But what I'm looking for is, what are the real signs of movement? Mm-hmm. And even when you're looking at the polling that you referred earlier, his numbers are still in the 70s with his base, mm-hmm. right? And so there is still this holding on to the thing that got you into the dance you were otherwise not invited to. Mm-hmm. And they're not going to
independents helped get him into that dance, and they ran for the hills already.
They ran for the hills, and that speaks to a broader narrative. But we're focused on what's happening inside MAGA-verse in the mm-hmm. Republican Party, mm-hmm. and so I'm looking to see with Marjorie Taylor Greene, Massey, and others, if they're able to form an alliance around other issues that are coming down the pike in such a way that they create within that caucus in the House, for example, or more broadly between the two chambers, a pressure point that Donald Trump has to pay attention to. Because Donald Trump right now is really good at the one-off. I'll single out Andy. I'll single out Marjorie Taylor Greene. I'll single out, fill in the blank individual congressman. But he's not so good when there's a full frontal approach. But that hasn't really happened. And so let's see. That's what I want to see. I want to see Marjorie Taylor Greene organize the resistance around the things that she's talking about, because she knows there are members who stand with her.
Mm-hmm, of course.
She can be that voice that gives them cover, that gives them support, that gives them, Donald Trump, the only thing Donald Trump has done to me is called me, Marjorie Taylor Greene or whatever the hell that's supposed to be. Marjorie Taylor, I guess there's a Taylor Swift reference in there somewhere, but he's scrambling to try to find a nickname to give her. All right. But that tells me that there's not a full-throated break as you would see with, some of the other people that were in his universe, where he now wants to go after, former members of his administration, et cetera. But I'm just not convinced that we're at a point where we've turned the corner. We may be approaching the corner. I don't know if we've turned it yet.
Yeah, no, that's an interesting assessment and a fair one, because that's the big question is, like, where does this go from here? People have always said Trump's a bully, right? So if we're in the schoolyard, he finally got punched in the face. Marjorie Taylor Greene punched him in the face. He didn't really do much. He started crying like a little baby and started attacking female reporters. So
Right. That's it.
The question is, does that embolden other people to go up to the bully and punch him in the face? Or to your point, is it just like a one-off where maybe a month from now she's back in his good graces like Elon Musk is back in Trump's good graces, you know? Like
there you go. That's what I'm talking about, because the bully analogy is the one that really works. When you have that one kid in the schoolyard that punches the bully back, and the bully is initially shocked by that because he thought he had control over everybody, but he hit a tripwire for some reason on some issue. Maybe it was too much for this one individual. Maybe it cut too personal, whatever it was. But they struck back. Question is, everybody else who saw that, watched that, do they now realize, oh, we can smack this guy, we can hit back, right? And recognize the power of not just one, but the power of many to do that. And that's something that a number of us have been emphasizing to the law firms and to the media,
right,
and to the universities. Get off your lazy ass, organize yourselves collectively, and recognize that, yeah, you can smack this guy. Because at the end of the day, when you stand up, look, you still have the ultimate power. If the universities in a particular state or jurisdiction align themselves and said to the senator and the members of Congress, guess what? You're done. We're going to make sure you do not go back to Congress. You don't stand with us. You're not representing us in this fight with this man. You know he's wrong. He's trying to extort us. He's telling us how to run our universities, et cetera, et cetera. He's doing everything you claim was an anathema to your principles. Well, guess what? We're not writing a damn check. We're not offering any support or help. In fact, we are going to actively campaign against your effort for re-election. Guess who's going to pay attention to that?
Sure.
Donald Trump or the senator and the congressman? And so learn how to use the power in the game that you naturally have. And that's something I think Marjorie Taylor Greene has realized, that she has that power to do that. The question becomes whether or not everyone else sees the same thing that she sees, aligns themselves in that effort, and creates that defensive wall against the bully's attacks.
Yeah. I mean, the way I see it is that these congressional Republicans, most of them hate him. They know he's corrupt.
Yes.
They know he's selfish and self-serving. They know he's destroying the party or already has destroyed the party. They agree with basically everything you and I feel. But the question is why, when they have all the power to get rid of him, they haven't. And so to me, it's because they fear the base. They have always feared that base. Not in a pure electoral sense. They fear the base literally showing up at their house with a fucking shotgun. Okay, so
that's what they fear.
Yeah, so
that's more what they fear than anything else.
Yeah, but the interesting thing is, if MAGA is or might be starting to break a little, or if it continues to break, right? And if, like you say, Marjorie Taylor Greene can mobilize some support around her and then have people join her in this new movement, this softer MAGA, that's when it all falls apart for me. That's when Congress, Republican Congress people are like, oh, we don't have to be afraid of the base anymore because the base is not fully on his side anymore. Then you have a different landscape. I don't think we're there now. I'm not sure we'll ever get there, but I do think there are signs that there's a fissure in that movement.
Yeah,
that could go either way at this point, you know.
I get that. I'm not convinced completely, because the threats, and this is something that you're seeing play out now with Donald Trump calling for the hanging of members of Congress, because they rightly reminded military personnel of what the Military Code of Justice explicitly says. This is not something that's made up. And for those who are listening, the Military Code of Justice, with respect to unlawful orders, tells military personnel, you shall not follow an unlawful order. Now, folks, here's the reality and the truth. And I have this conversation with members of the military. It is a difficult position for our service members to be in, because while there is the law that says that you must not follow an illegal order, when you don't follow the order, you are then subject to court-martial. Right? That's the reality of an enlisted man, for example, who's sitting there being told to do something. And if you don't believe that this shit can't happen, folks, can we go back? Can we go back to Lafayette Park here in Washington, D.C., when the President of the United States suggested to the chairman of the Joint Chiefs that they shoot protesters in the leg? Come on now, y'all stop being stupid.
Yeah, well, he's fired a lot of the military JAGs. Pete Hegseth is in charge of the Defense Department. So if you're a whistleblower in the military, who's going to protect you?
Right, and so while it was a great ad by the Democrats, and it leveled up accurately what the law is for, what the regulation is for our military. They follow a very different set of rules than the rest of us. Their conduct, their behavior, their decisions are guided by a very strict code of military conduct and military justice. And the military justice part of this says you shall not follow an unlawful order. That's all the Democrats were leveling up and reminding them. And why were they doing that, Andy? Because you have members of our military now seeking counsel because they're being advised or told that they will at some point need to do certain things. And they don't want to. They know they're being put in a difficult position. So they're seeking lawyers. But the problem is they got rid of all of the internal legal apparatus, or got rid of most of it, that would help guide a lot of these decisions.
Yeah, I think it was General Mark Hertling I saw this morning or last night, and he was saying how what would happen in normal times is you're given an order, you question it, you don't know if it's lawful, you go to the JAG, you have a conversation, then you go back to your commanding officer and you say, hey, I can't do this because I've been advised that this is blah, 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 and then the commanding officer revisits the decision, and then they change the policy, and that's that. And
that's that.
But in this administration, there's no that's that. It's like we want troops on the streets. We want people, the military, potentially shooting, protesters, and that's the goal.
So you've got an individual as our Secretary of Defense. And, not war. I refuse to call the department that because we're not at war. And
Amen.
Bullshit. Mm-hmm. But you've got this idiot, TV talk show host sitting there as head of the Department of Defense, and he will be the one to give, stupid orders like that because Donald Trump wants to clear the park, or he wants to, teach the protesters a lesson, and he orders Hegseth to order the general to order the personnel on the ground to fire on U.S. citizens. So what does that soldier do, who's now been deployed to the streets of our cities? But I would think unconstitutionally, the little thing called posse comitatus, right? Mm-hmm. It gets in the way, but we'll ignore that constitutional bar. And now we've got troops in our cities, and they're given an order to fire into a crowd next spring or next summer who are protesting if there's another No Kings rally. And Donald Trump is itching for the fight because he wants to invoke the Insurrection Act. He can't help himself. He's been wanting to do it from the very beginning, but he hasn't been given a reason to, because all the protests that have happened so far have been peaceful. People are dancing and singing and saying, we don't want you as a king, right? They're not angry. They're not setting cars on fire. They're not doing that. And they can't infiltrate those fights because people have gotten better. The organizers have gotten better at sussing out who the troublemakers are, right? And so when there is no fight that triggers you to act a certain way, I think you become more dangerous, because then you start looking for little things that you can go after. And this is one of those little things that you can go after. And now calling for, hanging of Democratic lawmakers puts their lives at risk, because a lot of his folks are cray-cray, and they take that stuff seriously.
Let me ask you
and
this.
We know that because we have testimony from them that say, well, Donald Trump told us to come to Washington.
Right.
Donald Trump told us to go to Capitol Hill. Donald Trump basically said it was okay to do what we were doing.
Do you think on some level, that those Congress people, Democrats, produced that video in large part because they knew that it would just get under his skin and make him crazy and do weird shit. And then force the Republicans to show that they're not going to go against him and stand up for what's right. Like, do you think it's more just a ploy?
Okay, I'll be straight up honest. I don't think Democrats are that strategic. Republicans would do that. The Democrats did that because there was a nobility to it. They were actually concerned about what was happening inside the military.
No, Democrats and their damn integrity again.
I know. There it is, baby. There it is. And look, I'm just being honest about it.
Yeah.
That's some shit we would do. We would see the strategy of putting your opposition in an untenable or uncomfortable position, making them react a certain way, and certainly having that filter out downstream because you have a sense of how their base is ultimately going to respond. And that's your end game. But Democrats are more noble in that regard. They saw and what was happening with inside the military. They had conversations with military personnel who felt that this was becoming a big problem for their enlisted men and women. And so they came up with a strategy to address that. Now, there's a downstream political benefit from that for sure, but I wouldn't say that was their leadoff pitch with this.
I'd like to think it was just a little bit of what they were motivated to do.
Well, it may be, but no, a little bit. But regardless, it still had the intended consequence.
Absolutely.
The Republicans are back on their heels. They're overreacting negatively to something that they otherwise. Let's just say, if the shoe were on the other foot, folks, Republicans would be saying something very differently, and they would very much be on board with leveling up what the military code of justice says, and that our military should not be required to execute unlawful orders from this Democratic president.
Right.
They would be making that case all damn day. But because it's Donald Trump and they have bought into his BS and his lies, they will stick their head in the sand and ignore the very thing that they know to be true, that our military are not required to follow an unlawful order from this president.
Yep. Michael, always a great conversation. I look forward to our next chat.
You got it, my friend.
Take care.
Take care.
This episode was produced and edited by me, Andy Ostroy. It was co-produced by Maddie Rosenberg and Jen Hammoud for Radio Free Rhinecliff, with additional editing by Maddie Rosenberg, music by Andrew Hollander, and graphic design by Cricket Langell. And with a special thanks to our sponsor, The Epicurean. Again, thanks for listening. Please rate and review wherever you get your podcasts, and subscribe to the Backroom with Andy Ostroy YouTube channel, where you can watch full videos of our interviews. See you next time.